I wandered around the halls of the great consulate, watching the ambassadors and officers mingle and mince their way through the political landscape. Yet another group of new life had appeared in the galaxy, and realized that working with the Confederacy was a better option than going it alone. Warmongering warrior races, greedy conglomerates, former pirate kings, and worldless religious nomads were everywhere, with human explorers finding more and more life to add to our empty universe. All kinds were here. Insectoid hives, apes, beastkin, serpents, so many were here, and one could easily find their closest facsimile on the human homeworld. I wandered about and marvelled, breathing in the glorious stench of politics. And then I spotted them. 3 of the new delegates were huddled near a maintenance door, grumbling about each other. I recognized the uniforms, the sleek, freshly pressed, tailored suits, the random medals that are given to nepotists who got commissions as a means to keep them out of everyone's hair. The loud-mouthed new blood that has no combat experience, but is given a combat medal as a matter of ceremony when they pass boot camp, and their families or brews put them in random positions to shut their competition out. A very stupid, irritating practice, one that is illegal within the Confederacy, for very good reason too. I casually approached, close enough to eavesdrop on them, and pretended to admire a particular painting on the wall. The conversation, if you could call it that, was exactly as I expected. Plotting to turn their military might against the weakest member of the Confederacy using an ancient rite. The newcomers always do this. The 3 idiots in question were secondary advisors to their respective nations. The delegate from the Skatandi, a race of worm-like creatures, an advisor of the warrior-like 4-armed ape creatures known as the Abakani, and a particularly sneaky-looking fellow from the bird-like people of the Avanako. "How do we provoke them? The right of conquest must be invoked with a provocation," the Abakani said.
"They are the weakest of all. It should be easy to conquer them, perhaps a show of force," the Skatandi delegate growled through his million-toothed mouth. "We can challenge them to the ancient rite. We can take their measly worlds one by one with no issues," the Avanako rasped through his beak. "What is the ancient rite? I have not heard of it," the Skatandi asked. "An ancient rite of conquest that allows any empire to directly challenge another for control of a specific star system. A single battle on their home territory. If we win, we claim their world. Am I the only one among us that actually bothered to read any of the documentation?" the Avanako squawked angrily. "It is then settled. But what do we do? I say we strike an outer colony. Probe their defenses. If we win, we challenge the homeworld," the Skatandi growled. It was here I could no longer hold myself together, and burst out laughing as I approached the trio of morons. They all looked at me sheepishly. Oh, I love the new blood. On one hand, listening to stupid people attempting to explain how the universe works is hilariously funny. On the other hand, I truly question my faith in civilization when stupid people talk. "How dare you!" the Abakani barked. "Oh yes, indeed. How dare I call the nepotistic, shut-the-hell-up poster boys of soon-to-be-dead empire stupid? How dare I assume the fresh blood who have not read any of our historical documentation would be stupid? I'm so sorry I made the assumption that even the loudest voices in the room are also the stupidest. I'm so sorry that my 300 years of work in this establishment is completely destroyed by the great stonking nitpick cannons of 3 useless noblemen." "Oh wait, I'm not sorry," I said, approaching them. The 3 seemed cowed by my approach. Not only was I a clear foot taller than they were, I also had a greater deal of time in this position, and consequently, I learned how to properly use my voice to convey authority. "I shall now ask you 3 morons a question. Do you know of the Sulamai, the Rakan, or the Pokolonians?" I asked. I got empty silence from the 3 of them. "I see. Time for a history lesson. The Sulamai were the first ones to challenge humanity to the ancient rite. They were, at the time, the very founders of the Confederacy, and sported the largest armies in the galaxy. You haven't heard of them before? That's because the humans wiped them out, save one planet," I said. They tried to talk, but I carried on. So here's the silly tale. Humans, as it turns out, don't boast about their accomplishments like most others do. They keep secrets, such as the size of their military. The Sarinai were not aware that human warships are standard according to the galactic ship class, except they field a naval force roughly 20 times the number as everyone else. Apparently humans have this thing where they don't trust very many people. For good reason, as it turned out. So the Sarinai attacked a colony world closest to their borders. They won that battle, of course, but they lost the war in totality when humanity retaliated by swarming their homeworld, I said. The three glanced at each other concerningly. Then, guess what? Humanity tried negotiating the whole way. Please don't make us do this, they said. The Sarinai didn't heed any warnings. They ignored it. The entire time, their warrior pride wouldn't let them stop. Even though humanity did everything to placate them, including offering one of the most lucrative trade contracts ever conceived. Humanity responded by systematically obliterating their entire military when they said no. Now the Sarinai were deposed and live exclusively on one planet in the galaxy. The very same planet they won in the ancient rite, I said, and smiled as I watched the colour drain from their faces. That was funny. They stared at me, empty-minded for a time. Then the Rakan appeared and tried the same, thinking humanity had expanded their efforts with the Sarinai. That thinking didn't last long, as they shortly thereafter lost not only the world they challenged, but half their colony space in the retaliatory challenges. The Rakan were the only ones who had any sense and withdrew all their claims. Humans, not so much. The Rakan homeworld was challenged in the right, and predictably, the humans won, I explained calmly. But clearly my demeanour wasn't very comforting. The colour in their scales and feathers had changed. Pale, empty. Clearly I was making an impression. The Polaconians? Well, let's just say there's no real reason to talk about them anymore, I said, with a strangely evil grin. They all flinched at the concept. And then there's us, the Sarinai. You know what we did? When the Confederacy resumed operations and the Council called for new leadership, guess who was nominated for the position of Grand Counselor? Humans, of course. They rejected the claim and instead nominated us for the position. You know why? I asked, now uncomfortably close to the three idiots. Silence. Terrified staring. Because we were the first to declare them as trade partners. We were the first to see them for what they were. And now, we are among the wealthiest nations in the Confederacy, and also the most well-armed and well-kept. Why? The humans saw us as allies at the time, and all because we didn't fight them. Unlike everyone else. We didn't think much of it at the time, of course, but after 3 centuries of work, we wouldn't have it any other way, I said, watching their responses. They responded by opening their mouths, nothing coming out, then continuing to stare at me. I simply laughed my way out of the room and headed to the council chambers for the next meeting. The next hour or so was predictable droll, comments on policy, arguments for budgetary limitations, and the usual politicking. I, however, couldn't wipe the smirk off my face as I waited for the Terran Federation to speak. Finally, the time came. The Terran delegates opened with a security recording of the 3 morons plotting and scheming. It took all of the self-control I had to not burst into laughter right then and there. What made this even funnier was that moments before, during their commencement speeches, the 3 newcomers' ambassadors preached speeches of peace and friendship. The atmosphere in the room grew darker and more menacing as the security recording played out, stopping just before I decided to say hello. For someone preaching peace and friendship, it seems you are more warmongering than expected. Care to explain? The human delegate asked. The ambassadors all glared at their young charges. The Abakani ambassador was the first to speak. Please excuse my nephew. He is young and impulsive. And apparently very aggressive and warlike. You let these people operate your diplomatic corps? The Terran asked. Well, the galaxy is a hostile place after all. One has to have soldiers on hand in case diplomacy fails. The Avanaka replied. We have heard that excuse before. Let me guess.
fresh out of Officers' Academy, given a station either as family courtesy or as a means to shut them up so actual soldiers could do work properly? The Terran said. I had to wrap my hands around my mouth to stifle a laugh. I was barely holding on at this point. This was all too funny. The alien ambassadors responded by shuffling and looking away in shame. As expected, play the rest of the recording, please, the Terran said, then allowed the recording to resume. My brilliant explanation followed, resulting in not only the newcomers becoming rather terrified, but also several other members of the council responding in kind. I was beyond hope at this point, and was barely holding it in.
Well, that was enlightening,
the Abakani ambassador said as he glared back at his nephew. So now you have an idea what's going on, perhaps you'd like to rethink your warfare stance? The Terran asked.
We had no warfare stance. We came here to engage in peace,
the Abakani ambassador protested. Then would you care to explain why there appears to be backroom scheming going on? The Terran asked forcefully.
Because my nephew is a snorkel blat,
the Abakani ambassador yelled loudly, then reached over with one of his large fists and bashed the poor boy over the head. I officially lost it. I wheezed out a laugh and collapsed to the floor in a state of hysterics, and gasped out several words I can't recall due to being short of breath from laughter. It took me several minutes to regain my composure as I rolled on the floor. I was still giggling to myself as I crawled back into my chair. When I finally calmed down, I simply spoke, casual and free. And this, boys and girls, is why humanity's political acumen is so strange. It's a paradox within its own paradox. And I quote, humanity doesn't fight to win, it fights to make sure it never has to fight ever again. We don't go halfway, we go all the way, and make sure we don't have to again, even if it's by example. God, I remember that man. Great Admiral Joseph. May he rest in peace, I said. The Terrans and half the assembly dipped their heads in a moment of silence. It's brilliant as well. An incredible way of thinking, contradictory though it may seem. When presented with a challenge of any kind, respond with overwhelming force in order to make sure that the next challenger doesn't try the same thing. Make an example of previous conquests and hang their corpses on the wall for all to see. A subtle nod that simply says, they found out, you will too. Amazing strategy, really. And the best part is, the humans are not only crazy enough, no offense, but heavily armed enough to actually carry out that threat. Extend a hand of peace while in the shadows behind you sits a reminder as to why the peace is offered in the first place, I remarked casually, lounging a bit too happily in my delegation seat. The council gave the humans a side glance. The humans responded with silent glares and death stares. As consequence, I yelled, and activated my podium. We, the Sarinai Imperium, do hereby propose that the ancient rite be hereby permanently abolished. As good a litmus test as it is for newcomers in the galaxy, I dare say the example has been made, and that law is no longer of value. I do welcome the newcomers to the Confederacy, and dare I say a lesson is learned. They know their place as much as we do. I vote to welcome the free newcomers and hope for a prosperous future. I bellowed proudly. The council all agreed, nodding. The humans, although still in attack mode, couldn't help but offer a small grin. I hereby propose a vote to the council. Proposition 4418 and Proposition 4419. Inclusion of the Skatandi, the Abakani, and the Avanako to be formally entered into the Confederacy forthwith, provided they complete orientation as needed. And the permanent abolition of the ancient right of domination, because, frankly, I think I know why the humans keep it around, but it has outlived its usefulness. All in favour? Say aye, I yelled, raising my hand. The humans were the first to raise their hand for the votes. The council then raised theirs in turn. Motion is carried unanimously. Welcome to the fold, new friends, the Chamberlain yelled, banging his gavel. And now to formal business, dear Terrans. Are you aware that Abakani are currently facing a crisis with a food shortage? I said, with a definitive smirk and not so subtle wink at the Abakani ambassador. This made the humans snap out of their practice military days. I love watching them suddenly switch brain patterns like that. From, I want to stab you, to I want to hug you in milliseconds flat. Gives me chills.